My brother stole my savings to propose to his girlfriend, so I exposed him at the party. I never imagined my life would twist into the kind of drama people binge watch online, but the night I exposed my brother at his own proposal felt like watching a slow motion train crash that I somehow couldn't step away from. Before everything shattered between us, things were almost peaceful in a messy, imperfect kind of way. I'd been living in a small but cozy apartment, working a steady job, slowly building my future dollar by dollar. Every paycheck, I'd quietly move a chunk into my savings account and imagine the life I was working toward graduate school. Maybe a chance to finally pursue counseling like I'd always wanted, maybe even a tiny place of my own, where the walls weren't thin enough to hear my neighbor AS Blender at 6 every morning. My younger brother Adrian was the opposite in every possible way. Where I planned, he improvised. Where I saved, he spent. Where I clung to responsibility like a lifeline, he drifted between ideas and jobs with the restlessness of a hummingbird. Growing up, I always covered for him lying to teachers, paying little debts he conveniently forgot, defending him from angry ex-friends who learned the hard way that Adrian was unreliable. My parents always said, he just needs more time, but time didn't seem to be helping. If anything, he leaned on me more as the years passed, and I let him because I thought that's what good siblings did. The day everything changed started like any other. I made coffee, fed my cat, sat on the couch in my ragged sweatshirt, and opened my banking app, ready to transfer my usual savings amount. But before I could even think about the transfer, my stomach sank. The balance was wrong, not slightly wrong, catastrophically wrong. Where there should have been nearly a 22,000, there was just over 40. For several seconds, I genuinely thought I was hallucinating. I refreshed the app. I closed it. I reopened it. Same tiny numbers staring back at me like an insult. A buzzing panic began crawling up my spine. I clicked into the transaction history with dread pooling in my chest. Then I saw it, one massive transfer leaving my savings account, and beside it, the name, Adrian M. For a full minute, I sat completely frozen. I remember looking at my reflection in the black screen of my phone after it locked, wondering if I was the kind of person who looked like they could be stolen from if I had some sign on my forehead saying, "Take advantage of me. I want to fight back." My hands shook as I dialed Adrian S. number. He answered on the third ring, sounding groggy, like I'd woken him from some peaceful nap. The moment I demanded an explanation, his tone shifted not to guilt, not to regret, but to irritation, like I was the one inconveniencing him. He said he needed the money for something important, which was the kind of vague nonsense he always used when he wanted to avoid admitting something stupid. I pushed him harder until he finally snapped and told me everything. He needed the money to fund a perfect proposal to his girlfriend Emily. Not just any proposal, he wanted fireworks, a rented venue, a private videographer, custom decorations, a ring big enough to make her cry immediately. I stared at the wall in disbelief as he rambled. He acted like this was normal, like taking $22,000 without permission was the same as borrowing a jacket without asking. When I demanded he return it, he scoffed and told me everything was already paid for and non-refundable. He said not to make this a big deal. He said I was overreacting to financial betrayal and identity theft. I could barely breathe. For years, I'd sacrificed things, new clothes, vacations, nights out, telling myself the future would be worth it. And he stole it like it was spare change sitting in a drawer. I told him if he didn't pay me back immediately, I'd go to the police. He laughed and said that would ruin the family. Then he added something that nearly made me drop my phone. Besides, Lena, you weren't invited to the proposal anyway. You have a tendency to ruin the vibe. I don't remember hanging up. I don't even remember standing. I just remember this numbness spreading through my chest, the kind that comes when someone you trusted slices you open without warning. For the next 2 days, I barely slept. I tried everything, calling the bank, asking if the transfer could be reversed, even researching legal action. But because Adrian had once been a joint user on my childhood accounts years ago, the bank told me the case could get complicated, family-related, and it would take months at best. Meanwhile, Adrian posted on social media about how excited he was for the proposal. Pictures of the ring, teasing videos of the venue being decorated. I stared at those posts with a kind of quiet rage I didn't know I was capable of feeling. I wasn't even angry about the money anymore. I was angry about the disrespect, the entitlement, the casual way he'd treated my sacrifice like his convenience. On the morning of the proposal, I woke up with clarity burning in my gut. If he wanted to pretend everything was fine, let him, but I wouldn't. If I had to stand alone against the betrayal, then so be it. I got dressed, grabbed my keys, and drove to the venue, a beautifully decorated backyard at Emily's parents' estate. Soft lights wrapped around trees, candles floated in the pool, rose petals covered the walkway, and a giant illuminated "Marry Me" sign sparkled at the center. The place was breathtaking, painfully so. Guests arrived in elegant outfits, unaware of the storm brewing in my chest. When I stepped through the back gate, heads turned. Some people recognized me, offering a polite wave or smile. Adrian saw me from across the yard and his face went pale instantly. He rushed toward me, frantic, whisper yelling about how I wasn't supposed to be there. But for once, I didn't shrink. Under his pressure, I didn't apologize. I didn't rationalize his behavior. I stepped past him with a calmness that felt surreal and approached Emily, who was glowing with anticipation, her family surrounding her like a warm circle of pride. She smiled softly at me, confused but kind. "Oh, I didn't know you were coming," she said. "Adrian didn't mention he wouldn't have," I replied gently. Then, before fear could stop me, I spoke loudly enough for the entire group to hear. "Emily, before you say yes to anything tonight, you should know how Adrian paid for this proposal." The entire backyard fell silent. Adrian lunged forward, trying to grab my arm, but Emily held up a hand, signaling him to stop. Her parents stared at me, eyebrows raised. My voice didn't tremble. "He stole $22,000 from me, all of my savings. He took it without asking, without telling me, and used it for this." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Emily's face shifted from confusion to disbelief to something heartbreakingly close to fear. Adrian stammered, trying to spin lies, but I had receipts, literal screenshots. When I showed them, the truth became undeniable. Emily's father demanded Adrian step away from her. Her mother looked at him with disgust. And Emily, she quietly slid the engagement ring off her finger, as though it burned her skin, and placed it back in his trembling hand. Adrian tried desperately to explain himself, but no words could patch the crater he'd blown open. He begged Emily to reconsider, begged her parents to listen, begged me to stop ruining his life, but as he panicked, something strange happened. I felt calm for the first time in months. I didn't scream. I didn't shake. I just watched the truth speak louder than any defense he could invent. Eventually, he was asked to leave. Alone. Without Emily, without applause, without the future he had tried to buy with someone else. A sacrifice. And as I stood there in the dim glow of the lights, I realized something painful and liberating. Family is not defined by blood. It is defined by respect, by trust, by character. And Adrian had none left. Walking back to my car, the night air felt cold but clean, like the world had reset itself. I didn't get my savings back, not yet, but I reclaimed something more important. The part of me that finally stopped being afraid to stand up for myself. In the days after the disastrous proposal party, my life felt like it had been split into two versions. The one I had before I confronted Adrian, and the one I was now stumbling through, filled with tension, silence, and an overwhelming sense that every bridge I'd ever built with my family was suddenly on fire. I kept trying to go about my routines, wake up, go to work, come home, feed my cat, but everything felt heavier, as if the air itself had thickened around me. I couldn't shake the memory of Adrian's face as I exposed him, or the absolute stillness that followed my words. It replayed in my head like a loop I couldn't escape, and with each replay I felt a mixture of sadness, anger, and a strange, quiet relief. I had finally stood up for myself, but the cost was becoming clearer by the hour. My parents didn't call that night or the next, but by the third day my phone lit up with my mother's number. She told me they were having dinner and wanted me to come over, her tone carefully neutral, like she was tiptoeing across thin ice. Against my better judgment, I agreed. I think part of me hoped for something impossible, like support or understanding. When I walked into their house, nostalgia hit me like a wave. The scent of my mother's cooking, the hum of the old ceiling fan, the paintings we'd made in elementary school still hanging crookedly on the wall, all of it made my chest tighten. But the moment I stepped into the living room, reality shoved me back. My parents were sitting stiffly on the couch, and Adrian was slouched beside them, arms folded defensively. His expression wasn't remorseful or embarrassed, it was annoyed, as if I'd inconvenienced him by daring to be the victim. My mother stood and urged me to sit, wringing her hands the way she always did before a difficult conversation. "We need to talk about what happened," my father began, sounding like a manager lecturing employees rather than a father comforting a hurt daughter. "Adrian made a mistake," my mother added quickly, and I felt something inside me deflate. A mistake. That word was becoming a drumbeat that made my skin crawl. A mistake is accidentally shrinking someone's sweater in the wash. A mistake is forgetting a birthday. Taking $22,000 from your sister without permission, lying about it, refusing to apologize, and then banning her from your proposal because she might ruin the vibe that isn't a mistake. It is a choice. A violation. A betrayal. I stayed silent, staring at them. My father cleared his throat. "He didn't think it through, Lena. He wanted to impress Emily and her family." My voice came out sharper than I intended. "So he stole from me." Adrian scoffed. "God, can you stop saying stolen? I told you I'd pay you back." "When?" I shot back. "Do you even have a job right now?" His jaw tightened. "I am figuring things out. You use my savings to figure things out," I said, my voice trembling with anger. My mother put a hand on my knee. "Sweetheart, we know you're upset, I repeated, laughing bitterly. "Mom, he drained my entire savings, everything I worked years for, and you are talking to me like I am the problem?" My father leaned forward, clasping his hands. "You shouldn't have exposed him in front of everyone. That was extreme." My heart dropped. He told me to my face that he wasn't inviting me because I might ruin his vibe. He laughed when I confronted him. He didn't care. He wasn't going to apologize. He wasn't going to pay me back, and he was perfectly happy letting me suffer in silence while he played the perfect boyfriend. Adrian slammed, his hand on the arm of the couch. You humiliated me. Everyone thinks I am a thief now. Because you are, I said, quieter but firmer. My mother gasped softly as though the word itself was too harsh to acknowledge. Don't say that, she whispered. We were family. That word family had been used like a shield for Adrian-esque behavior his whole life. It was the excuse, the protection, the blanket smothering accountability. I stared at them, feeling something inside me snap. The version of me that always stayed calm, always stayed polite, always stayed quiet. She stood up and walked out of the room. I said, I want my money back. All of it. And I am considering legal action. The room erupted instantly. Adrian jumped to his feet. You were insane! You would seriously send your own brother to jail? I stood too, meeting his glare head on. You should have thought about that before you took what wasn't yours. My father raised his voice, something he rarely did. Enough! We're not going to talk about jail in this house. Then help him pay me back, I said. My father's face reddened. We don't have that kind of money just lying around. And there it was, the truth. They wanted me to eat the loss because they couldn't absorb it themselves. My mother burst into tears. Please, Lena, can't we just move on from this? We can't let one mistake tear our family apart. I felt cold all over. It's not one mistake. It's just years of enabling him. Years of forgiving him. Years of me being the only one who takes responsibility. I grabbed my bag and without another word, I walked out. My mother's sobs followed me, but Adrian's accusing stare was the image burned into my mind. Over the next week, my parents kept calling and texting, oscillating between guilt-tripping me, begging me, and pretending everything was normal. Adrian didn't reach out, which, frankly, was a relief. But the silence didn't heal anything, it only made the wound sting more. Then, out of nowhere, Emily messaged me. She wanted to meet. My heart thudded with anxiety, but something in her text, gentle, apologetic, convinced me to go. When she walked into the cafe, she looked like she'd aged 5 years in a week. She hugged me immediately, murmuring, I'm so sorry. And then she told me everything. She had no idea where the money came from. Adrian had told her his job was going great, that he'd been saving, that he wanted their future to start with a bang. Her voice shook as she admitted she'd ignored red flags, brushed off his irresponsibility because she believed he'd grow out of it. But seeing the truth laid out in front of her, the screenshots, the proposal disaster, the way he reacted rather than apologized made everything clear. I ended things, she said softly, for good. She told me her parents were furious, not because of the party being ruined, but because Adrian had lied to them about his finances, his job, everything. They feel betrayed too, she said. And honestly, I don't think he'll ever understand how much damage he caused. I nodded slowly. He doesn't think he did anything wrong. My parents keep calling it a mistake. Emily let out a sad laugh. That is not a mistake. That is a personality flaw. We sat in silence for a moment, stirring our coffee. Then she said something that stuck with me. I know it hurts, but you did the right thing. Sometimes the truth blows things up, but only because the foundation was already cracked. When we parted ways, I felt lighter and heavier all at once, but the world wasn't done with me yet. That evening, just as I was settling onto the couch, my doorbell rang. When I looked through the peephole, my stomach flipped. It was Adrian. His eyes were bloodshot, his hair a mess, his expression tight and chaotic, like a person teetering on the edge of losing control. I opened the door just enough to speak. What do you want? He pushed against the door, but I held it firmly. We need to talk, he said, voice trembling with barely contained anger. You ruined my life, Lena. My grip on the door tightened. No. You ruined your own life. I just stopped covering for you. You turned Emily against me, he yelled. You turned her whole family against me. You turned Mom and Dad against me. No, I said quietly. The truth did that. He shoved the door harder. Let me in. No. His face twisted with something dark anger, desperation, entitlement. I couldn't tell which. You'd better fix this, he spat, or I swear I cut him off. Leave, Adrian, now, or I am calling the police. For a moment, I thought he might fight back, push harder, scream louder. But something in my eyes must have told him I meant it. He backed away slowly, cursing under his breath, and walked down the hallway. I closed the door, locked it, and slid down to the floor, shaking. For the first time, truly, I felt afraid of my own brother. And that fear was about to grow, because what happened next would push our already shattered family into complete chaos. The days after Adrian showed up at my door were some of the most unsettling I had ever experienced, because suddenly the person who had always been the reckless, immature brother I tolerated had morphed into something unpredictable. Someone capable of crossing boundaries I'd never imagined he would even approach. I found myself double-checking the lock every night, leaving lights on longer than usual, jumping at small noises. It wasn't that I believed Adrian would physically harm me. It was the unpredictability, the desperation in his eyes that shook me. People who feel like they are losing control often lash out in irrational ways, and Adrian had never handled consequences well. Meanwhile, my parents continued trying to play peacekeepers, calling me constantly, urging me to be the bigger person, as if I hadn't spent my entire life being exactly that. By the fifth day, I stopped answering their calls altogether. I needed space, real space away from everyone else's expectations, demands, and emotional manipulation. But that space was short lived because one morning, right as I was leaving for work, I found something taped to my apartment door. A note. The handwriting was messy, rushed, and unmistakably Adrian S. It read, "Call me. We need to fix this before I lose everything." The word fix sent a wave of anger ripping through me because in Adrian S. world, fixing things never meant taking responsibility. It meant everyone else sweeping up the mess he made. I crumpled the note and threw it away, refusing to feed into his panic-driven attempts to pull me back into the chaos. But that same evening, as I returned home exhausted, the building manager flagged me down. "Your brother was here earlier," he said. My blood ran cold. Adrian had come back. The manager continued. "He wasn't causing trouble, just pounding on your door. I told him you weren't home. He left eventually." I thanked him, but inside my mind was spiraling. Adrian wasn't letting this go. He wasn't calming down. If anything, he was unraveling further. That night, my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. Normally, I would ignore it, but something nudged me to answer. It was Emily. Her voice was unsteady, hushed. "Lena, I think you need to know something," she said. "Adrian S. been calling me nonstop, leaving voicemails, begging me to talk to him. He is angry and he keeps mentioning you." My chest tightened. "Mentioning me how? He is saying you ruined his life on purpose," she whispered. "He said he's going to make you understand what you did." It scared me, honestly. That's why I kept calling. I don't think he's stable right now. A chill raced through me. "Do you think he would hurt me?" I asked quietly. There was a long pause. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I don't think you should be alone right now." After the call ended, I sat in my living room for what felt like hours, staring at nothing. Part of me wanted to believe Adrian wouldn't cross a truly dangerous line. But the way he'd shown up at my door, the way he'd shoved against it, the rage twisting his face, the image haunted me. I needed to do something. So, the next morning, I went to the police station. I felt like ridiculous walking in, like I was overreacting, but the officer at the front desk listened with surprising patience as I explained the situation. The theft, the confrontation, the threats, the escalation. When I finished, he nodded thoughtfully. "You can file a report for the theft," he said, "and if he returns to your property, you can request a restraining order. But right now, unless he directly threatens harm, we can't do much." It wasn't the solution I'd hoped for, but it was something. I filed the report. Leaving the station felt surreal, like I had just taken a step into a version of my life I never expected to live, reporting my own brother. But what was the alternative? Allowing him to terrorize me emotionally? Waiting until he did something irreversible? No, I wouldn't let myself be cornered again. But I didn't tell my parents about the report. Not yet. I needed time to process everything before dealing with their reaction, which I knew would be dramatic. By the time I got home, I found another unexpected message, this time from Emily's father. He asked if I could meet him at my earliest convenience, which immediately knotted my stomach. We met that afternoon in his office again. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I received a call from Adrian today," he said. The room suddenly felt smaller. "What did he say?" I asked, bracing myself. "He blamed you for everything," he replied bluntly. "He also insisted that I convince Emily to speak to him. He said he was at the bottom and that you were dragging him further down." My breath caught in my throat. He continued, "I think your brother is unraveling emotionally, and I fear he may act irrationally." "I filed a police report this morning," I said quietly, and to my surprise, he nodded with approval. "Good," he said. "You did the right thing. Too many people allow guilt to trap them in toxic situations. I won't let my daughter be manipulated, and neither should you." His words steadied me like an anchor. But then he added something unexpected. "Your parents called me too." My stomach dropped. "What did they say?" "They begged me to help mediate. They believe the situation has gotten out of hand." I laughed bitterly. "Out of hand? Their son stole from their daughter and threatened her, and they were worried about optics." He didn't deny it. "Their loyalty is misplaced," he said, "but loyalty is a habit, and habits are difficult to break." As I left his office, I felt strange clarity settle over me. I couldn't change Adrian, I couldn't change my parents, but I could protect myself. And I would. But the situation was about to escalate even further because when I returned home, my phone buzzed with a flurry of messages from family members, cousins, aunts, even my grandmother. Word had gotten out. Adrian had told them a version of the story so warped it almost made me laugh. According to him, I was a resentful sister who had made a scene for attention, who had ruined his happiest moment, who had threatened to destroy his future out of jealousy. Jealousy, that one hurt not because it was true, but because it was so absurd that it highlighted how little Adrian understood me. Then came the message that broke me, a long, emotional paragraph from my mother. She said she couldn't sleep. She said the family was falling apart. She said she felt like she was losing both her children. But what stood out most was the final line. Please stop this before it goes too far. Too far? Adrian took my savings, humiliated me, threatened me, stalked my apartment door, and I was the one letting things go too far? I didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, I took a hot shower, curled up on the couch with a blanket, and stared at the ceiling while the city hummed outside my window. My mind spun with everything that had happened, everything that might happen next, and just when I thought the night couldn't get worse, someone knocked on my door. A slow, deliberate knock. My heart froze. I stood without breathing, tiptoeing toward the peephole. When I looked through it, my entire body tensed. It was my father, alone. That should be comforted me, but his expression wasn't too soft or worried, it was stern, almost angry. I hesitated, but finally opened the door. Dad, I said quietly. He stepped inside without asking. We need to talk, he said. His tone made me nervous. He sat down on my couch and pinched the bridge of his nose, something he only did when he was deeply frustrated. Your mother is distraught. Your brother is falling apart. Your grandmother is calling us nonstop. This entire family is in chaos. I swallowed hard. None of that is my fault. He looked up at me with a glare I had never seen before. Lena, your brother is at the lowest point of his life. He says talking about leaving town, quitting everything. He says saying he has nothing left. My heart thudded painfully. Fear, guilt, and defensiveness colliding. What do you want me to do? I whispered. I want you, he said, to fix this. The words hit me like a punch to the chest. Dad, I said slowly, I am the one who was stolen from. I am the one who was threatened. I am the one who had to file a police report. His face twisted in anger. A police report? You went to the police? My silence answered for me. He stood abruptly, towering over me. How could you do that to your own family? How could he do what he did to me? I shot back. He's your brother, my father snapped. And you're treating him like a criminal? I stared at him, heart pounding, fighting the sting of tears. He is a criminal. The room fell silent. My father's eyes hardened. And then, almost under his breath but loud enough for me to hear, he said, You've become cold, Lena. I barely recognize you anymore. His words cracked something inside me, something fragile I'd been holding together for far too long. Without another word, he walked out of my apartment. And for the first time in my life, I realized I wasn't just losing my brother. I was losing my parents, too. Little did I know the final confrontation, one that would change everything forever, was coming sooner than I expected. After my father left my apartment, slamming the door behind him with a force that echoed through the hallway, I stood alone in my living room with my heart pounding so loudly it felt like the only sound in the world. His words rang inside me like a cold echo. You've become cold, Lena. I barely recognize you anymore. I had always been the calm one, the mediator, the caretaker, the daughter who never caused problems, the sibling who quietly took on burdens without complaint. But now that I was finally standing up for myself, setting boundaries, refusing to be manipulated or dismissed, suddenly I was cold. It was almost laughable, except nothing about this situation felt funny. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined Adrian spiraling further, my parents blaming me for it, and the whole family fracture widening until it split completely. I kept replaying the moment I filed the police report, replaying Adrian S.'s face at my door, replaying my father S.'s disappointment. By sunrise, I felt hollow, like I had nothing left to give. But the world wasn't going to pause for me to collect myself. Around 9 a.m., I received a text from my mother. Please come to the house, we need to talk. It is urgent. Something about the word urgent made my stomach twist. I didn't want to go. I didn't want another round of guilt, accusations, or emotional manipulation, but a piece of me still hoped that maybe, just maybe, my parents were finally ready to see the situation clearly. When I arrived at their house, the tension hit me immediately. My mother was pacing the living room, her face puffy from crying. My father stood near the window, arms crossed tight, staring outside like he couldn't bear to look at me, and Adrian was sitting in the corner of the room, hunched over, shaking slightly. His hair was a mess, and his eyes were red and hollow like he hadn't slept in days. I froze in the doorway. My mother ran to me instantly. Thank God you're here, she cried, grabbing my hands. Your brother is not well. I looked at Adrian carefully. He didn't meet my eyes. He looked broken, defeated, but also angry, like a storm simmering under the surface. My father gestured for me to sit. We need to talk about the police report, he said. There is no we, I replied quietly. I made my decision. My father S. jaw clenched. You made the wrong one. Before the argument could escalate, Adrian finally spoke, his voice cracking. Lena, why? The question hit me like a slap, not because of the words themselves, but because of how he said them. As if I had wronged him, as if he were the victim. Answered carefully. Adrian, you stole from me. You didn't apologize. You showed up at my apartment angry, threatening, yelling. You pushed on my door. You scared me. He shook his head, tears spilling. I didn't mean to. I was desperate. Everything fell apart because of you. My father stepped in. You need to fix this, Lena. Your mother and I cannot watch him fall apart like this. Something inside me snapped. Fix what? I demanded. Fix the fact that he stole from me? Fix the fact that he refuses to take responsibility? Fix the fact that you both are more concerned about his feelings than my safety? My mother sobbed harder. He is our son, and I am your daughter, I shot back, louder than I intended. The room went completely silent. For the first time in my life, I saw something shift in my mother's expression. Not guilt, not apology, but shock, as if she had genuinely forgotten that my pain mattered just as much as Adrian said. Adrian stood shakily. I'll pay you back, he said, his voice trembling. I'll do whatever you want. But please withdraw the police report. If this goes any further, I could lose everything. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that this broken, desperate version of my brother meant what he was saying. But I also knew Adrian. I knew his patterns. I knew that promises made in panic evaporate the moment the crisis passes. If you want me to consider withdrawing it, I said slowly, you need to show real accountability. Not just words. Actions. I'll do anything, he whispered. Anything. Before I could respond, my father suddenly walked over to me, his expression hardening again. Lena, enough is enough. You are dragging this out. He apologized. We're asking you as your parents let this go. My chest tightened painfully. I'm not just going to forget $22,000, I said. I'm not going to forget being threatened. I'm not going to forget being treated like the enemy. The conversation spiraled from there. My father accused me of being selfish, of prioritizing money over family. My mother begged me to be compassionate, to be understanding, to help your brother get back on track. Adrian swung between crying and lashing out, saying things like, you want me to suffer? And this is all your fault? And through it all, I felt myself shrinking inside, folding inward, overwhelmed by the crushing weight of expectations placed on me. But then, something unexpected happened. Something so small anyone else might have missed it. Adrian slipped. Not physically, emotionally. He got angry, too fast, his face twisted with resentment. You love your stupid savings more than you love your own brother, he spat. This is why you're always alone. This is why nobody wants you. The words hit me like a knife. Not because they were true, but because in that moment I realized Adrian didn't regret what he did. He regretted getting caught. He regretted the consequences, but he didn't regret hurting me. And my parents still defended him. And suddenly, like a lens coming into focus, the entire dynamic of my family became clear. I had spent years, decades being the responsible one, the stable one, the easy child. They had taken advantage of that. They assumed I would always bend so Adrian didn't have to. And now that I wasn't bending, they were acting like I had committed some unforgivable crime instead of finally standing up for myself. I felt something inside me settle. A strange, calm clarity. I stood up slowly. I am done, I said. My voice didn't shake. My mother looked up, confused. Done with what? Done carrying this family, I said. Done being the only one who pays for Adrian's mistakes. Done being treated like my feelings don't matter, Adrian scoffed. So you're just going to abandon us? No, I replied. You abandoned me the moment you decided I wasn't worth honesty or respect. My father tried to step toward me. Lena, don't do this. I stepped back. I am not doing anything. I am just choosing myself for once. I walked toward the doorway. My mother rushed after me, grabbing my arm. If you walk out now, she whispered, everything will fall apart. I gently removed her hand. That is not my responsibility. And I left. I didn't look back. I drove home with tears streaming down my face, not because I regretted anything I said, but because choosing yourself over family is the kind of grief no one prepares you for. Over the next few weeks, everything shifted. My parents called less first daily, then weekly, then only occasionally. Adrian sent long messages apologizing, then blaming me, then apologizing again, like he was stuck in a cycle of panic and denial. Eventually, he texted saying he had taken up part-time work and would start paying me back little by little. I didn't respond, but I kept the messages. I wasn't withdrawing the police report, not yet, and he knew it. Surprisingly, the strongest support came from Emily and her parents. They checked in on me, offered help, and encouraged me to stay strong in my boundaries. Emily even admitted that exposing the truth had saved her from making the biggest mistake of her life. As for me, I began rebuilding financially, emotionally, mentally. Slowly, painfully, but surely. I picked up more hours at work, applied for scholarships, set new savings goals, started therapy to untangle years of suppressed resentment and guilt. And somewhere in that healing, I realized something important. Sometimes the family you reborn into isn't the family that protects you. Sometimes the strongest act of love is the one you give to yourself. Months passed. One afternoon, while sipping coffee in my apartment, I received a notification, a deposit of $150, the first repayment from Adrian. A small step, but a real one. And for the first time since everything exploded, I felt hope, not for reconciliation, but for closure. The kind of closure where you stop waiting for apologies that may never come and instead create a life where you don't need them. In the end, exposing my brother didn't destroy my family. It revealed the truth about it. And once you see the truth clearly, you can finally choose the life and the peace you deserve.